The book of Leviticus is a book that a lot of people might put at the bottom of their list of favorite Bible books. And I was that way for a long time too. It would almost be like when I'm doing my daily Bible reading for the year, oh great, I've got the book of Leviticus, I've got to try to slog through this. But in all honesty, over the years, this book has become one of my very favorite ones. I think one of the problems that people have with the book of Leviticus today is there's so many mind-numbing details that you find in there, and people wonder, what does this have to do with me? And that's really what I'd like to talk to you about for just a few minutes today, is what the book of Leviticus has to do with me as a Christian in the 21st century. In Leviticus chapter 3, when Moses is describing how a person offers a peace offering, he says in chapter 3 and verse 2 that he shall lay his hand on the head of his offering and slay it at the doorway of the tent of meeting, and Aaron's sons, the priests, shall sprinkle the blood around the altar. And you may think, okay, so what? Well, if you look over in the New Testament to Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 22, the writer of Hebrews there says this, "Let us draw near with a sincere heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience, and our bodies washed with pure water." So there's really a sprinkling of blood for us as Christians today that takes place. It takes place in a spiritual sense in our hearts. Now, back to the book of Leviticus, and this is really the heart of what I wanted to get at today. In chapter 9, beginning in verse 1 of chapter 9, Moses says to his brother Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel, "Take for yourself," verse 2, "a calf, a bull for a sin offering, and a ram for a burnt offering, both without defect, and offer them before the Lord." Verse 3, "Then to the sons of Israel you shall speak, saying, Take a male goat for a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both 1 year old, without defect, for a burnt offering." Now, he's given a command, and then he's told to pass that command on to the people. But look what happens in verse 5. "And so they took what Moses had commanded to the front of the tent of meeting, and the whole congregation came near and stood before the Lord." And when you study through what Scripture has to say, especially in the Old Law, what we learn is that this idea of drawing near was really the Hebrew mindset for worship. And when a Jewish person would hear those words, "draw near, let us draw near," that's what's in their mind, that we are coming before God to worship. Well, let's go back to Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 22 for just a moment. Let us draw near with a sincere heart in full assurance of faith. Now, the book of Hebrews is called Hebrews for a reason. It's a message that was drafted in the first century for Christians who were of Hebrew descent. It's written very much as a means of convincing them to stay the course with Jesus Christ. Don't go back to Moses. Don't go back to the law of Moses, but to stay faithful to Jesus Christ. And terminology is used here and elsewhere in the book of Hebrews that brings their minds back to this idea of worship. Let us draw near. And there's an attitude with which we are to draw near. What God was telling them in the book of Leviticus, which, by the way, is very much a book that tells us you are to be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. That's really the key of the whole book, is that when we draw near to worship to God, there's a right attitude that we must have. It must be an attitude that honors God. And then in chapter 10 of Leviticus, Moses gives us a case in point. In verse 1, "Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took their respective fire pans, and after putting fire in them, placed incense on it, and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them." This is our case in point. Nadab and Abihu, sons of the high priest Aaron, offered strange fire. Now, strange is not a word in this passage or text that means weird. Strange here simply means something other than what was expected. And if any of our prospective future students are watching this, that's a test question, by the way, when we get to that in class. They offered strange fire, something that the Lord had not commanded. This is not what the Lord was expecting. Now, it's possible that when we read this is something that God was not expecting. It's not what He had commanded. It's possible that these two brothers could have offered in their defense, well, the Bible didn't say not to. The Bible doesn't say not to. That's an excuse that some people want to offer today. But it's pretty clear from what happens next that the Bible does not have to specifically say not to do something for it to be wrong to do. In verse 2, God brought fire down from heaven and killed them before the altar. Not even waiting till after worship was over, but before the altar they were immediately killed. And then in verse 3, Moses connects the dots for us and tells us really what really was going on here at this time. Moses writes in verse 3, Moses said to Aaron, "It is what the Lord spoke, saying, by those who come near to me, I will be treated as holy, and before all the people I will be honored." You see, the problem was not that they offered some kind of fire that God just decided suddenly He didn't like. The problem was, by offering worship that God had not authorized, they had not treated God as holy. They had, in fact, treated God as unholy. What does that mean for us? Why is this passage in Leviticus so applicable to you and to me today? When we offer our worship to God, when we draw near to God, we should do so with the right attitude, with a sincere heart, in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water.